Hey friends, and welcome back to the Rebel Show. It's awesome to be here. It's awesome to be a part of this. You know, we are living in a nation that is diverse and totally split. Things are turning black and white. Like I've talked about a few episodes before, how I feel like we're in a time of exposure and where both sides of the aisle are either going to be black or white. You got to pick one, is where we're headed. So one thing I want to talk about today is the news media. I mean, the news media is something, the press is something that it's a tool that's being used incorrectly. And it's important for us to recognize that, you know, the Constitution talks about the freedom of the press, right? It's important to understand what that's actually talking about. You know, the term press is referring to the printing press, you know. And it's what we now know as the news media, right? You know, as time evolves and time goes on, technology changes. It's important to realize that, you know, the American press is given a constitutional right to exist and be protected and report events around the world. That's really its goal, you know, report news. It's the only business protected by the Constitution, too. You know, the freedom of the press. The freedom is designed to prevent government from interfering in or taking over the news outlets. That's why it's a freedom. Anybody should be allowed to go out and report news. You know, you shouldn't have to have like a document saying that you can do it. Anybody can spread ideas. That's the point. The intent of the First Amendment was to ensure the spread of ideas without limitations. So there could be people that spread ideas that are terrible, but they're free to do it. You know, there's people that want to spread ideas about socialism or ideas about camping. Anything you want, spread ideas. You can have a YouTube channel talking about your favorite topic. That's the point, and that's the freedom we have to share ideas. You know, pamphleteers back in the day took to the press during the Revolutionary War era and before and spread the message of freedom and the need to separate from a tyrant king, because we know the King of England was pressing the British citizens of America to pay taxes they shouldn't have been paying. They were suppressing them, and they were forcing them to, like soldiers, to live in their homes, different things like that. So pamphleteers were one of the original powerhouses to spread the freedom message, you know. So when we talk about propaganda, it's information of a biased or misleading nature used to promote or publicize a particular political cause or point of view. And that's the area we're starting to live in right now. Like CNN, MSNBC, CBC, and even Fox News. If you're conservative, you kind of look to the Fox News things, but they're starting to get that way. You know, there's others too, but when you stop reporting news and start mixing opinion with news, and you don't differentiate with which one is, you start to become a problem, you know. It's a systematic effort to manipulate other people's beliefs, attitudes, or actions and means of symbols. So, and the intent is, right now, with the news media, is to direct your thinking in a certain way. So I've talked about this before. One thing that's important to do is take in all the information you want from any source you want and just kind of sit on it for a bit and wait and see what happens. Wait and see what comes out of it, right? In 2 or 3 days, you may hear more. Maybe in a week, you'll hear more about that specific topic, right? And so you're just listening and waiting and just seeing what else comes out. Because typically with the mainstream media, they'll tell a story and it'll be one thing, and then all of a sudden a few days later, more comes out and you find out the full thing. So just take any source you want and wait and just watch. That's what I've been doing. You know, propaganda is a big thing in socialist communist countries, where you've probably seen movies where they have like the loudspeaker where the president is posted all over the walls. and he's putting his propaganda message out there, and they've got the loudspeaker putting out the message, him talking, saying whatever they're supposed to believe. You've probably seen this in movies. If not, it happens, and it happens in real life. That's something that's happening now. That's something that's happening in the United States. We're starting to see a change of tactics and a change in how we receive information. To be, I mean, you could watch, like I've talked about this before, you could watch 4 or 5 news companies tout the same language and speak the same exact thing. It's not them independently reporting, it's them specifically putting out a very specific message that they want, and they want us to think a certain way. That's the deal with propaganda. You know, a lot of times they're reporting false or fake information. You know, modern news outlets are starting to put out fake news, pseudo events. They report on something and then create an event that they continue to report on. That's fake news. So if we call out the news organizations and say, hey, you're doing wrong, you're lying, you're doing this, you're doing that, you're not reporting correctly, is that an attack on our First Amendment? Or is that us keeping in check these very important institutions that need to really be putting a check on themselves? Which one is it? You know, our president regularly calls out news media outlets that are repeatedly reporting inconsistent with truth and basically opinion, and they're making it news. If I give you my opinion, that's not a news. That's my opinion. News is to say, oh, you know, there was this robbery today at this store, or these amount of planes landed successfully. News is just telling about events that happened. When I start to give my opinion on how or why, that becomes a problem. Also, what are the sources? If they say, oh, this is just some random source, or this is they don't name the source or who it is, well, they could have just made it up themselves. So it's important to realize when we're watching news that we are getting like second and third hand information. We're believing that hopefully these people were there and saw it, or they knew somebody that was there and saw it. And a lot of times that's not the case, because they have sources that we don't know who they are. We don't know where they came from. They're like a random source. Oh, this guy on the street. Oh, who is that? We don't know. Okay, whatever. So, you know, a lot of the mainstream media outlets right now are trying to make the president look bad or unfit, or like he's not qualified, or his mental health is wrong to be in office. And just watching him and watching his different speeches, I think the president's doing a great job. I think he's a great president. I mean, this guy's got tons of experience in life. He's got tons of experience in business and with working with people, and he knows how to do it. I enjoy watching this man be president. And a lot of times he labels certain outlets as fake news. He's referring to those pseudo events, those fake events that he talks about, that the news media will report on something, and then they'll create an event about it, and it's not even real. There's a lot of examples of these. And if you start watching, like I see a lot of this on YouTube and Twitter, to where conservatives will put together videos on how there's the conservative version, and then there's more of a liberal opinion version of an event. And you'll find out there's a ton of information missing, and there's a lot of specifically trying to make a narrative happen, right? So that's what's happening. So be aware that there's a narrative right now that could be influencing you. And I think it's important for us as conservatives, as Christians, as just American citizens, to go back and just step back, and look and see, where are we? What are we believing? What are we doing? Because our activity in life right now is so important. These next elections coming up in the future here in a couple of years are so important. So just consider this as you take in information. You could hear negative reports about something the president did, and it may or may not even be true. It may be important to dig dig in and do your own research. And I think that's a point in time where we're at now. It is time for us to dig in and find the truth, you know? So sometimes the president's called a dictator, or he's trying to control the media, or he's damaging the First Amendment and trying to limit the free press. You know, that's not true. If you call out the free press, like I mentioned earlier, that's not an attack on it. That's you literally trying to say, hey, you're doing wrong. You shouldn't be reporting this way, and you need to stop it. Report news. Don't be so opinionated. And we're so in that environment right now with a lot of news. There's a lot of good talk radio, though, by the way, on Sirius and various stations around. There's a ton of good radio going on. And the conservative movement is moving away from the mainstream media and going towards the talk radio spectrum, because there's so many good conservative talk radio hosts out there like Sean Hannity, Mark Levin, Brian Kilmeade, and others. There's tons of them. I'd recommend going out and looking that for your news. So I barely dug into this topic. I got through barely a page of my notes, and time is already over. So I'll probably do a part 2 on this. But I just want to say, you know what? It's time for Americans to stand up. It's time for our voice to be heard, and it can be done through voting. And it's time to stop watching mainstream media. It's time to move on to alternate news sources. They're going to tell us the truth, and they're going to give us an unbiased opinion, and they're just going to report news the way it's supposed to be. So I encourage all of you, stop watching the mainstream media and find other sources of news through the internet and stuff like that.